Hey everyone, we got the Apocalypse and Predator systems in Horizon Zero Dawn, which just came out for PC recently. Time to put the cherry on top with my ultimate and most difficult game neutral system of the big three, the Abomnification system. The Abomnification system assigns a variety of randomly chosen morphing modes to NPCs, which causes them to constantly change their shape and size to new randomly chosen shapes and sizes at random speeds. If you've ever done a large dose of acid before, the gameplay experience basically becomes the same thing. A general overview video of the Abomnification system will come out one day, and when it is, watch it. I'll link it below when it is available, but that will contain all the explanations for how the Abomnification system itself works as far as the scaling generation goes. Implementation of the Abomnification system is very easy to do if the game has built-in, easy-to-change scaling parameters for a creature's height, width, and depth. In many games, these can be found right by the coordinates, and they are simple floating point values that, if I change it from 1 to 2, for example, would cause a creature or player to take up twice as much space in whatever dimension that value belonged to, height, width, or depth. There's probably billions, probably not billions, many videos on YouTube that cover this very basic topic here. It's a very easy change. Once you have the coordinates, it's right next to them, typically. Most games I omnified early on had an easy to find scaling parameter, which was way before the Abomnification system came to be. But you couldn't always find it in the games I was doing, and I feel like all the recent games I've done are that way, as in they don't have an easy to change scaling parameter made available in an obvious spot. Many times if the game is using a custom or maybe not as widely used engine, I find that there is not a scaling float in place in the location you'd expect it to be. So when a game doesn't have one easily available, we need to create our own scaling functionality. We need to add code that will change the scale of the player or creature to whatever value we set for its height, width, and depth. And this involves what is usually the most difficult kind of reverse engineering I have to do for these games and that I've done up to date with gaming. There are no guides on this type of thing out there. I'm sure most people would just give up if they couldn't find an easy to change scaling parameter. Well, I can't give up. It's part of my brand, and my games need it, or I can't play them on stream. So I did the crazy work for you, and I will show you how I found the code and what I did to the code to let me make creatures take on crazy sizes. So looking around at the various physics structs, like we have here where the coordinates are, I couldn't find any parameters that seem to be related to scale. Typically it's gonna be, in a lot of games, a floating point value equal to 1 by default, and 3 of them, somewhat close to the coordinates here, that control the scale. I don't know if that's just like a property of some commonly used engine that I've been working with or whatnot, but most people, if you ask them about that, that's what they're gonna say. That's the general wisdom on the street, is that scale is typically a floating point value or 3 floating point values that's gonna be found near the coordinates. And couldn't find anything here. Worse, this game seems really prone to crashing when you start manipulating random bits around, which is very unfortunate. For example, all those values you just saw by the coordinates, most of them, if I change them at all, the game would crash. In my opinion, that's kind of indicative of that the game's code isn't incredibly stable. However, I wouldn't make any official claims of that here, since direct raw manipulation of bits definitely doesn't fall inside the range of acceptable use cases. Still, I found this game to be much more crashy than many other ones I've done. Just some hard truths. So I knew I had to find the function of code that draws the models of characters. So how do we do that? We do that by searching for unknown values and then manipulating something about the character that affects their model in a known semi-quantifiable way. At least if we don't know the exact amount, at least the direction of the change. So as you can see here, our character is standing straight. Well, if I crouch down, they take up less height vertically, don't they? See? Of course, I'm crouching. What's happening here? Well, their various skeleton parts are being arranged in a way that changes the various matrices getting rendered, so they take up less space vertically. So let's search for changes in the height of the character. So I'm going to do a search here for unknown initial value for all floats in the game. Once that is done, there's only 4 billion values to search through here. I'm gonna make my character crouch, and then I'm gonna search for all decreased values. This takes a bit, the very first filtering operation that you do. That took a bit. Okay, we're down to 8 million. That's better than 4 billion. Once that's done, I'm gonna go back in here. I'm gonna make my character stand straight up, and we're gonna search for increased values. Hey, 4 million. And then we're gonna crouch and search for decreased values. 2 million. It's kind of funny how it keeps on getting cut in half. We're gonna keep on doing that again and again and again. Eventually, we're going to have values that are related to just my character model. I got it down to 21,000, just much better than 4 billion. I'm gonna be interested in values that are within the region of memory that data related to my player might be in. And if we were looking at that struct before, we saw that all that user data, all that character data, that's in the region of memory starting with 291. Definitely not in this area of memory here, which I believe is more used for working memory. Temporary addresses used for calculations and stuff like that. I then checked out what was writing to these values here. I would just sort of pick a random value that looked correct to me, like 0.865 here. It's like something that could be related to my height here. I'm standing near fully upright, so it's close to that 1.0. I would see what's writing to the address. And then I did that with a bunch until I found something that looked relevant to me, which was this one right here. Let's open that up. This is very similar to other drawing functions that I've reverse engineered before. Now, I've learned about all this stuff via reverse engineering, not via proper game development. I'm a professional software engineer, but I've never worked with games actually professionally. So understand the conclusions I'm drawing here are via deduction and not through actual experience writing the same type of code. Feel free to correct me if I'm mislabeling anything here. So this code here is relevant because, as you can see with these writes here, we are writing 4 sequential rows, if you will, of 16-byte data. 4 data points per row, 4 floats. So that's a total of 16 data points with all these rows. We can visualize that data as a 4x4 matrix. And there's indeed probably the data type that's being written to here. In my investigations, I've noticed a lot of the graphics we're interested in are drawn via the rendering of 4x4 matrices. So this is something that interests us. When I see it, this might be a potential place we can affect the scale. If we put a breakpoint right here, you'll notice that this area of code here is actually looped. I know this because if I isolate this to just calls where RCX is equal to that, you'll see something akin to a counter used to access data that is found as an offset from this base address here. So this code runs many times per entity. It's basically writing out a series of 4x4 matrices all next to each other until it's done filling up this big structure. I call each iteration here a rendering pass. Different visual elements are drawn each pass. One important thing that you would notice if you start making changes to the values being written here is that changes made to one pass carry on over to future passes. So if I double the values going to here, let's say, double that, what's the next MM 12, and I would do that to hopefully double the space the visual element's taken up. A future pass is going to be basing its value on those doubled values, which the first time that happens will result in quadrupled values, and will eventually lead us down the path of blowing up-ish, and things will just get huge. So that was an initial problem that I ran into that I knew I was going to have to correct if we wanted to use this. And here is the contents of data nearby the RCX here. We can see this data is related to the creature's model, and also we see references to the skeleton. And this seems to be drawing out graphics for the creature's skeleton or model, and it renders all of its parts and positions them in the process. When I was doing this for Dark Souls 2, I found similar code that looked like this here, but I was then from there able to locate a more global drawing function whose values I can manipulate without that value propagating down the line. I thought I had to do that for this game as well. However, this area of code that we're looking at right here is actually good enough for what we want to do. It took me a bit, but the key was, and I guess it makes sense when I think about it, is just to manipulate values on the very first rendering pass, and you'll get what we want. Until I figured that out, we had some interesting looking model renderings. So let's demonstrate how this area code that we found, I can manipulate it to affect changes in the scale, shape, size of my character and other characters as well. Here's that code we were just looking at. So each row here, as we'll call it, is going to be responsible for a particular dimension. And maybe it's typically the same for these kind of structures, but I just went through and I experimented with each one and figured out what was what. XMM 12 here going to RDX plus RCX. Again, RCX is basically just the offset from the beginning of the skeleton / model structure that allows us to get to the particular matrix we're interacting with. This is where the width can be affected, our RDX plus RCX. The depth can be found at the next row here, RDX plus RCX plus 10. That's held in XMM 13. And the height is XMM 11. The final one, I'm not 100% sure what this affects. I think it may be purely positional, because when I was first looking into the height, a lot of the values that I found pointed back here. But what's important is that we don't really need to deal with this one at all. Now, in each row of data here, there's going to be only one value for each row that we want to actually change. Let's just take a look real quick, an example. So here's a particular row of data being manipulated here. This is one whole row right here. And this is RDX plus RCX right here. This is plus 10, this row. This is RDX plus RCX plus 20, and then this is the plus 30. And for each one, there's only one particular value that we want to increase. Changing the correct value will change the size of the creature for that particular dimension. There's some strange values though, right? We have some negative numbers and all that. These aren't the values we want to change, therefore other probably positional concerns. The way I figured out which value is the one we want to manipulate is I would just get a bunch of data here and I would just look and see what particular point on each matrix is never negative. And for the first one, which was width, it was this value right here, change. Depth here, and then height down here. So by changing these ones, I can change the scale of the creature. And let's see what that looks like right now. I basically just have a sample code here that plugs in right here, and we'll update XMM 12, 13, 11 to multiply each row by a specified amount on the data points that are related to the size, and then it will just multiply the other ones by 1. And behold, we have a hacked Horizon Zero Dawn with size changing abominations. Let's just throw it on right now. And as you can see here, we have a gigantic player character. The way we can filter out what's getting scaled, and we'll have a much more advanced filtering process when we get to it, is by looking at the RSI register. And it appears that each instance corresponds to a particular value for the RSI register. The player seems to always be the value 207. You know, who knows if that'll remain constant throughout the game or throughout different save files or whatnot. But knowing that, I can easily filter out the player, which is nice. Although we'll have a more advanced filtering functionality put in here anyway, because we're going to need to load scaling parameters that are very specific to the actual entity that were randomly generated at the previous point. I can easily adjust the sizes in whatever dimension I want. Let's just make her a bit shorter. Let's make her, there we go. She's now shorter. She's now not as thick. It's the width. She's now not as wide. Of course, back to normal. It's not 1-to-1. Increasing this by 2 gives me way more than just 2 times height. But it appears that doing it in increments of 0.2 essentially is increasing it by 100%. 1.2 is about double the normal height. That's 1.2. Here's 1. It's about double. And likewise, 0.8 is about like a half of the normal height. And yes, she has spiky hair. But this was impossible. When I first tried to screw with the scale, I was multiplying all the values in that matrix by what I wanted them increased amount to be. And it just resulted in some weird abominations. But there we go. But let's filter out the character and let's Let's see if it affects enemies. That's what's important, right? And yes, look in the distance. Those watchers seem a bit larger than normal. And yes, the bow that we have in our back is also larger than normal, and that will be filtered out when we actually have the Abomnification system in. Just for comparison here, this is without the scaling. This is with the scaling. And they look really good when they're blown up. But why stop there? Let's turn watchers into gigantic abominations. Holy crap. Those are gigantic. Help! My bow is gigantic too. Ah! Help. What happened to the nice, friendly, tiny watchers? So we found the scale place. So with that, we can actually implement the Abomnification system. And we're gonna go over that code right now. All right guys, here's the code for the scale morph hook where I generate the scales for creatures. It looks much the same as it does for any game now. I will be game neutralizing this code very soon. Right along the time I have a general overview posted for how the Abomnification system works, which will be linked below when I do have that posted. This is responsible for generating those scale values. I usually have it hooked into a different place from where we apply the scale values. If this was a game that had its own scaling parameters, then we would probably set them here as well. Depends. But basically, pretty much the same as any other game here. We have it hooked into a place in code that is pulling creature coordinates. Right here, it's REX contains an address to creature coordinates, and I think they're all doubles, which is why it's using this AVX instruction with one of the YMM registers, which we haven't worked with really so far. For the scale application code, that mainly looks the same as other games as well, and we covered in the Abomnification general overview video. We are hooking into the code we were looking at before, where the skeletal matrices values are being built. And it's very easy to find player information in this part of code here. Basically, R15, when that code is called, at an offset of 48 will contain the soldier struct, or creature struct as it is for non-humans. And that's where we store our scaling index at the soldier or creature struct at the offset of 188. Only other interesting thing to note here is that I had to change some of the bounds of the various dimensional scale lower limits and upper limits. These are used during random number generation. Like this says right here that the generated height scale, when it is generating height scales, can be between, well, normally it would be between 0.8 times to 1.4 times if you're reading this for a normal game. However, in this game, the scaling that gets applied, and literally the numbers generated here is taken, and that is used as a multiplier against the skeletal data. Normally this would be something around like 3,000. Because I want them to become 3 times as tall, etc. In this game, 1,000, or which is divided by 1,000 here, so it's 1 times is 1. But to get to 2 times the height, you actually want to multiply it by 1.2 times instead, and then it will become essentially twice as tall for 3 times in, 1.4 times, so it's in 0.2 increments. So 800 here represents 0.8 because it's divided by 1,000, and that becomes 1/2 size. Obviously 1/4 size would be 0.6. Etc, etc, etc. So these got changed around a little bit. But that's about it for the code. If you're interested in how this actually works, because it's very interesting, the Abomnification algorithm, make sure to check out that Abomnification general overview video when it gets out there. And this will all be part of the game neutral code that I have, because all this is game neutral code, except for the scale application code. But we'll talk about that more later. Let's see how this actually looks though. All right, we got the code enabled. Abomnification is in full effect. Let's see if things are abomnifying. That is randomly and constantly changing shape and size. Look at the turkey over there. We have an abomnifying turkey that's also moving very quickly because of the predator system. And we'll let's look at him. There we go. We have abomnified, I don't know what these things are called. Striders and abomnifying watchers. And it's a big success. It looks like we're on some severe doses or amounts of acid. Let's get a bit of a closer look on these guys. With this game Abomnified, with the Predator system in and with the Apocalypse system in, the game is now officially Omnified. It has the big 3 in there. And we can stream it live on twitch.tv. Terrifying. But it's not just creatures. We also have humans in the village, Abomnified. See if I can find that save. And then here, we're inside a village. Let's check out all the people. This guy is very slowly Abomnifying. Slowly getting taller, more menacing. Let's find a group of people. Pretty trippy. Look at these rather large children. This game is truly now Abomnified. Look at this kid. Look at this glorious abomination I made. Now this game can truly be enjoyed. Behold! Alright guys, very satisfying. We'll be doing some more hacks of the game, of course. We always try to develop something new with each new game that we do, so I'll post some videos for anything new that I come up with. If you want to catch the live gameplay of this beautiful creation I've made of this ultra hard, ultra awesome, ultra crazy Omnified Horizon Zero Dawn, there's only one place you can do that. That's on my Twitch stream, which can only be found at twitch.tv/omni. If you like the content, please give me a subscription on here. Hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. Like the video, leave a comment, whatever. Really do appreciate the attention though you guys are giving it, and I'll be continuing to do this for a long time, baby. Until next time, see you later.